standing strong and tall. Yeah, this is the bovine coming on the air, sharing the stories of the folks who care. Profiles of passion, voices of the trade, dairy strong legends being made. Yeah, this is the bovine coming on the air, sharing the stories of the folks who care. Profiles of passion, voices of the trade, dairy.
Welcome back to the Bovine Podcast. Usually, when we sit down to record one of these deep dives, we have a pretty good idea of the archetype we're dealing with.
Right, yeah. We usually know the kind of person we're going to be talking about.
Exactly. We're talking about the master breeder, the guy with the keen eye standing right in the center of the ring. Or maybe we're talking about the innovator.
The person who built a robotic milker in their shop or designed a totally new forage system, the tangible stuff.
The tangible stuff, exactly. But today is different. Today we are sharing a story that, quite honestly, stopped us in our tracks.
It is different. And I'll admit, when we first looked at the source material for this deep dive, this stack of papers titled Architects of the Index, I thought, okay, are we really going to spend our time talking about statistics?
It sounds dry when you say it like that.
It does. I mean, I love data, but stats can be tough. But then I started reading, and this isn't a story about math. This is the story that reminds you exactly why you got into dairy in the first place, but from a completely unexpected angle.
It really is. It's the story of the invisible architects.
Yeah.
The people whose work dictates almost every single decision made on a modern dairy farm. And the wild part is it happens often without you even knowing their names.
Yeah, the quiet guys in the background.
Right. So today we are doing a deep dive into the legacy of two men, George Wiggans and Paul VanRaden.
And before anyone tuning in thinks this is going to be some dry history lesson or a lecture on algorithms, let me drop a number on you, a really hard number.
Let's hear it.
These two men are largely responsible for pushing net merit progress, and that's the literal profit potential of your herd, from about $40 per cow per year to $85 per cow per year.
Okay, let's unpack that right away because $45 extra doesn't sound like a life-changing amount when you just say it quickly like that.
No, it doesn't.
It sounds like, I don't know, a rounding error on a feed bill.
Right. On the surface, it's just a small number. But let's do the real talk here. Let's do the barn math for you, sitting on the tractor right now listening to this.
Break it down.
If you take that genetic game, that exact acceleration that these two men engineered, and you apply it to a standard 300 cow herd over a decade, you are looking at roughly $135,000 in long-term genetic value added to that operation.
Wow.
Yeah. That is money that simply wouldn't exist without the systems they built. It's not just theoretical value, it's real equity in your herd.
That is massive. I mean, think about what you can do with that. That's a parlor renovation.
Yep.
That's a new piece of heavy equipment. That's literally college tuition for your kids.
Exactly. That is the margin between getting by and getting ahead in this industry. And the really crazy thing is that most producers have never heard of them.
Well, let's change that today. I want to take you to a specific moment to set the stage for this deep dive. Picture this. It's September 29th, 2025.
Not that long ago.
Right. We are in Madison, Wisconsin, at the National Dairy Shrine Banquet. It's one of those nights where everyone looks polished, the air conditioning is humming in the banquet hall, and the room is absolutely full of the heavy hitters of the industry.
The kind of room where if you're a genetics nerd, you're basically asking for autographs.
Totally.
You've got the heads of the major AI companies, the university professors, the legends of the breed, all sitting at those round tables.
Right. And on this particular night, George Wiggans and Paul VanRaden are walking up to receive the Pioneer Award. Inside that room, they are massive celebrities. They are revered.
Oh, absolutely. The geneticists in that audience have been citing their research papers for literally decades. They know that these two men are the giants upon whose shoulders the entire modern dairy industry stands.
But here is the contrast, and this is what really struck me. Step outside that banquet hall, drive maybe 20 minutes out of Madison to an actual working dairy farm. Maybe it's a 60-cow tie stall, or maybe it's a 2,000-cow rotary.
Any farm at all.
Right. And you go up and ask the guy scraping the alleys, hey, what do you think about Wiggans and VanRaden?
And what happens?
You'll probably get a blank stare. Almost total anonymity.
That is the paradox we are sitting with today. How is it that these men appear on practically every single sire list you use? I mean, their work is literally the filter you use to buy semen.
Yeah.
Yet the average farmer has never heard their names.
It's because they were the back end. They were the operating system.
That's a perfect way to put it. You don't think about the code writer who built the GPS software in your tractor, right? You just look back and know the rows are straight. You trust the screen. Wiggans and VanRaden were the code writers for the modern cow.
The code writers.
Got it.
I love that.
But here's the thing, and this is why you really need to stick with us on this deep dive. If you don't understand the system they built, you are definitely leaving money on the table. You have to know how the tool works to get the most out of it.
So how did two quiet scientists in a lab in Beltsville, Maryland, end up influencing your milk check more than almost anyone else in history? To understand that, we have to go back, way back.
And surprisingly, the story doesn't start in a sterile lab with white coats.
No, it doesn't. It starts, as the best dairy stories do, on the farm.
Both of them were farm kids, and I think that's a really crucial detail to hold on to. They weren't academics looking for a random subject to study. They were dairy kids looking for a solution to problems they had actually lived through.
Let's start with George Wiggans. He grew up near Aurora, New York, right on Cayuga Lake. Beautiful, beautiful country up there.
Oh yeah, gorgeous dairy country.
And his family had a dynamic that I think really shapes his entire trajectory. They ran a dairy, yes, but they also had a hybrid seed business.
So they were already in the genetics game, in a way.
Exactly. Yeah. And his grandfather wasn't just a farmer. He was a plant breeding professor at Cornell.
See, that's huge. So he had the dirt under his fingernails from the daily chores, but he also had that high-level academic rigor happening right at the dinner table. That's an incredibly powerful combination for a kid to grow up around.
It really is.
Yeah.
And here's the thing about George. He did the milking, he did the field work, he put in the sweat equity, but he didn't love the manual labor.
Who does, really?
Right. He wasn't the kid dreaming of being a herdsman for the rest of his life. He loved the quantitative side. He loved the numbers.
I can completely relate to that. I mean, I love cows, I love the lifestyle, but there's always a moment, usually when you're throwing heavy hay bales in 90-degree heat in a dusty mow, where you just stop and think, there has to be a smarter way to do this.
For George, that smarter way was calculus. When he enrolled at Cornell, which was pretty much destiny, given his family's deep ties there, his calculus scores were so high, they caught the eye of a specific advisor.
Dr. L. Dale Van Vleck.
Yeah.
And for anyone who doesn't know the academic family tree of dairy genetics, that is a heavy hitter name. Van Vleck studied under Charles Henderson, who is basically considered the father of modern animal breeding. Connecting with Van Vleck, it's like a high school basketball player getting scouted by Phil Jackson.
Right. It was a fast track to the big leagues of quantitative genetics. And Wiggans had this realization early on that I think is just so profound. He realized that farming takes seasons. You plant a seed in the spring, you wait months until harvest to see if it worked.
And with cows, it's even longer. You breed a heifer, you wait 9 months for the calf, then 2 years for her to calve in, then almost another year to see her complete a lactation. You're waiting years to see if your decision was a good one.
Exactly. The feedback loop is agonizingly slow. But computer programs, they give you immediate feedback. You write the code, you run it, and you see success or failure right there on the screen in seconds.
He wanted to hack the timeline. He saw that data could move infinitely faster than biology. And if you think about it, that core desire to speed up the feedback loop is what eventually led to the genomic revolution. He was chasing that speed from day one.
Now let's flip over to Paul VanRaden, because his story has a slightly different flavor but the same core drive. He grew up near Freeport, Illinois, 30-cow Holstein farm.
30 cows! Man, that is a classic, honest-to-goodness family operation right there. On a farm that size, you know every single cow's name, you know her quirks, you know which stall she likes to stand in, you know who kicks.
And I know you'll love this detail. His very first 4-H calf was named Spotty.
Of course it was. We all had a Spotty or a Princess or a Daisy. That's the relatable part. He started exactly where we all started, leading a calf around a sawdust ring.
But Paul had this hustle as a teenager that I think tells you everything about where he was headed. While he was in high school, he worked as a DHI supervisor.
Oh, man. The tester.
Yes, the milk tester. He was earning $2.20 an hour, driving to neighbor farms, collecting milk weights, taking those little samples.
I want you to really picture that. Being a DHI tester is not a glamorous job.
Not at all.
You're there at the most awkward hours, 3 in the morning, 4 in the afternoon. You're getting stepped on. You're dealing with manure splashing on your clipboard. You're dealing with grumpy farmers who really don't want to slow down their milking routine to let you take a sample.
It's a grind.
But think about what he was actually doing on a fundamental level.
What do you mean? What was he doing?
He was physically collecting the raw data, the milk pounds, the fat tests, the breeding dates. He was handling the exact data points that he would later spend his entire life analyzing. He was seeing the input side of the equation in the most visceral, real-world way possible.
He wasn't just getting a spreadsheet emailed to him. He was the one writing it down.
Right. He knew that data wasn't just abstract numbers floating on a screen. It was a freezing cold morning in Illinois with manure on your boots and a cow swinging her tail in your face.
It's amazing foreshadowing. He explicitly said later in life that he liked math more than baling hay. He saw that programming computers was, his word, easier and had far bigger benefits for the industry.
So you have these two guys, both farm kids, both intimately familiar with the sweat and the smell of a dairy, but they both saw the matrix, so to speak. They saw the data behind the cows, not just the physical animals themselves.
But before they could team up and literally change the world, George Wiggans took a detour that I think it's wild. It's the absolute last thing you'd expect in a story about dairy genetics.
This is the part of the source material that completely blew my mind.
Before he went to the USDA, before he settled into the lab, Wiggans went to Laos.
Laos during the Vietnam War era.
Yes. He went to the International Voluntary Services. And this wasn't some cushy study abroad program or vacation. This was incredibly dangerous.
You're talking about an active conflict zone right next door.
Exactly. Volunteers in that region had literally been assassinated. It was so volatile that Wiggans and his wife were restricted to provincial centers just for their own physical safety.
Talk about high stakes. Why even go? What was going through his head to leave the safety of the U.S. for that?
He genuinely wanted to help. He had this deep drive to improve agriculture on a global scale, to help people feed themselves. But he learned a lesson over there that became the absolute foundation of his entire career.
Which was?
He realized that you can't just tell farmers to change their practices. You can't just walk into a village or walk into a tie stall barn, for that matter, and say, hey, do this differently because my book says so.
Oh, that is a universal truth. Whether you are standing in a rice paddy in Laos or a milking parlor in Wisconsin, farmers are stubborn.
Right.
And we have to be stubborn. We are incredibly risk averse because one bad crop year or one bad breeding decision that ruins a generation of heifers can literally end the family farm. We don't have the luxury of adopting every new theory that comes along.
Exactly. And Wiggins saw that firsthand. He learned that people only change when the results are absolutely undeniable, when they can see it working with their own two eyes.
That is profound. And I think that specific philosophy is what made his later work so successful. He wasn't just sitting in an ivory tower building abstract math. He was building practical tools that prove themselves on the ground. He knew from his time in Laos that he had to win the farmer's trust with concrete results, not just a fancy theory.
And then when he finally came back to the U.S., he didn't even go straight back to dairy cows. He took a job working at a school for emotionally disturbed children that happened to have a model farm attached to it.
Huh.
And guess what they milked?
I couldn't believe this part. Goats.
So goats. He became the goat guy for a while.
Which is actually a pretty complex genetic puzzle in itself. Goats have totally different seasonality for breeding, different milk components, different challenges. Working with them probably really sharpened his skills in dealing with non-standard data sets.
So after all these detours, he finally gets to the USDA lab in Beltsville, Maryland. Paul VanRaden eventually joins him there. And we have to pause and set the scene for what the technology actually looked like at the time, because this isn't iPads and cloud computing.
No, we are talking the dark ages of computing.
Yeah.
Punch cards, giant reels of magnetic tape, batch processing that took up entire rooms.
If you wanted a national genetic evaluation to see how your bulls were doing, it happened twice a year.
Twice a year. Imagine trying to run a business that way today. You're picking a bull out of a catalog, and the data printed next to his picture is already 6 months out of date. You're basically flying blind, guessing based on old information.
It was incredibly slow, it was clunky, and for guys who like speed and efficiency, it had to be beyond frustrating.
Their mission, whether they knew it on day one or not, was to drag this completely analog, sluggish system kicking and screaming into the digital age, and they ended up doing it together for 38 years.
38 years in the same lab. That kind of partnership is just so rare anywhere, let alone in high-level science. John Cole, who worked closely with them, said it's difficult to think of another pair of animal breeders who were so influential as a team. They were basically a marriage of minds.
And what made it work was they had this perfect division of labor. They didn't step on each other's toes. VanRaden was the theorist. He was the guy developing the incredibly dense statistical methodology, the genomic predictions, the deep, heavy math.
And Wiggans.
Wiggans was the builder. He managed the operational systems. He was the one making sure that VanRaden's brilliant theories actually got translated into evaluations that could be generated, printed, and sent out to the farmers.
One guy designed the engine, the other guy built the car and made sure it could actually run on the highway.
You absolutely need both. Without the theory, the system is dumb. But without the builder, the theory is just a research paper sitting in a dusty drawer that never helps a single dairy farmer.
So let's talk about the first really big monster they tackled together, the struggle of breeding before 1994.
Oh, I remember hearing the older guys talk about this. Before 1994, picking a bull wasn't a science. It was like a loud argument at a coffee shop.
How so?
Well, you had one farmer who was completely obsessed with milk volume. He just wanted pounds of fluid in the tank. Another guy was totally obsessed with type. He wanted tall, showy cows. Another guy was worried about longevity and feet and legs. And there was no standard way to compare any of this. It was totally apples and oranges.
It was just chaos. Yet all these individual traits floating around on the page with no anchor.
It was. You were trying to balance all these biological traits with no actual dollar value attached to them. I mean, is 500 more pounds of milk worth more than a 2-point increase in udder composite? Who knew? It was entirely subjective. It was a guessing game.
Enter Wiggans and VanRaden. In 1994, they helped create something that changed the entire paradigm. Net merit.
Net merit dollars. NMNA. This literally changed everything about how we breed cows. It took production, health, fertility, longevity, and conformation, and it collapsed all of that complex biology into one single number.
One number to rule them all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It finally put a concrete price tag on the genetics. It told the farmer, plain and simple, this cow will make you X amount more profit over her lifetime than that cow. It took the emotional bias out of the decision and replaced it with cold, hard economics.
But surely there was pushback. I can easily imagine farmers looking at this and saying, you can't just reduce a living, breathing cow to a single dollar sign.
Oh, absolutely. There is always massive pushback when you change a deeply ingrained culture. People said, the computer doesn't know what a good udder looks like in the parlor. Or they'd say, you're completely ignoring the art of breeding.
And they had a point, right?
Yeah. To some extent, yes, they were right. Breeding is an art. You still need good cow sense. But Wiggans and VanRaden weren't trying to kill the art. They were just trying to give the artist a much better brush. They were saying, look, here is the economic reality. You can choose to ignore it if you want, but this index reflects what the milk market actually pays for.
They were grounding the art in science.
Yeah.
Giving it a financial floor.
Exactly. And over time, the money won the argument. It always does. Farmers realized that the high net merit cows actually did last longer, they bred back faster, and they made more profitable milk. The undeniable proof was right there in the bulk tank.
And remember the lesson from Laos. When the results are undeniable, the farmers change.
Full circle.
But they didn't stop there. They didn't just build the index and coast. And this next part of the deep dive is honestly like a detective story. They started looking for what wasn't there.
This is the Sherlock Holmes aspect of their work, the discovery of lethal recessives.
Explain that to us, because this is where the science gets really fascinating. What exactly were they looking for?
Okay, so picture this. They are looking at the entire bovine genome, and they are breaking it down into smaller segments called haplotypes. Think of haplotypes kind of like paragraphs in a massive book, and because of the database they built, they have this genetic data on thousands and thousands of animals.
Okay, I'm with you. Paragraphs in a book.
Right. Statistically speaking, if a certain paragraph, a certain haplotype, is really common in the Holstein population, you should eventually see an animal that has 2 copies of it. One inherited from the sire, one from the dam. It's just inevitable math.
Unless
that specific combination of genes kills the animal before it's even born.
Wow. So the complete absence of the animal is the clue they were looking for.
Exactly. They ran the massive data sets and found these specific segments where they never, ever saw a living calf with a double dose. Not once. That silence, that completely missing data point in the spreadsheets, was the smoking gun. It meant that if an embryo happened to get both copies of that haplotype, it died in utero.
These are the haplotypes we see flagged on semen lists now, right?
Yep.
HH1, HH2, HH3, and so on.
Yes, exactly. And here's why this matters so intensely to you on the farm. Before they discovered this invisible killer, you would breed a cow, and maybe she wouldn't settle. Or worse, you'd confirm her pregnant, and then she'd slip the calf early and come back into heat.
And what did farmers think was happening?
You'd blame everything else. You'd think, oh, it's just bad luck, or maybe the ration is off, or it was a really hot week, must be heat stress.
But it was actually a genetic time bomb.
It was. The math showed it was a 3.0 to 3.7% drop in conception rate for those specific carrier-to-carrier matings. Now, you can't see a dead microscopic embryo in a straw of semen, but you can absolutely see the hole in your wallet when a cow is open for an extra 40 days.
And the beauty of it is, they didn't just write a paper about the problem. They built the system to fix it.
Right. They integrated it right into the mating software. Now, when your AI rep runs your herd through the program, it automatically flags those carrier-by-carrier matings and stops you from making the mistake in the first place. They saved the dairy industry millions and millions of dollars silently just by preventing pregnancies that were biologically doomed from the start.
That is incredible. It's like they installed a hidden safety switch on the entire national herd. But the real explosion in their timeline, the moment the graph line just abandons all logic and shoots straight up vertically, was 2009.
The genomic revolution.
Talk to me about the 50K SMP chip, because that's the piece of hardware that changed everything.
Okay, so to be clear, other brilliant researchers developed the chip itself. It's essentially a glass slide that lets you look at roughly 54,000 specific genetic markers on an animal's DNA and do it cheaply. It's like having 50,000 individual mile markers on a highway instead of just knowing the start and end points of the road.
But having the markers on a slide is one thing. Actually knowing what they mean for the cow standing in front of you is a completely different challenge.
Right. That was the monumental hurdle. Wiggans and VanRaden had to figure out how to take that mountain of raw DNA data and make it useful. How do you take a blood or hair sample from a day-old calf and turn it into a highly accurate prediction of how much milk her son's daughters will give in 5 years?
It sounds like science fiction. But Wiggans called the use of those markers an inspired choice.
It truly was. And when they finally launched the official USDA genomic evaluations in January of 2009, the results were just absolutely staggering.
I have the numbers from the source material right here.
Yeah.
Genetic gain for yield traits.
Yep.
So milk, fat, protein increased 50 to 100% almost overnight. And fitness traits, things that are traditionally so hard to breed for, like health and daughter pregnancy rates saw 3 to 4 times the historical gains.
3 to 4 times. Think deeply about that for a second. For decades, the industry struggled just to maintain fertility. We were selecting so heavily for massive milk volume that we were inadvertently burning the cows out. We were losing ground on health traits year after year.
Because you couldn't easily measure it.
Exactly. But suddenly, with genomics, we could see the actual genes responsible for fertility directly in the DNA. We could actively select for them on day one without waiting for a bull to have 500 daughters milking in 10 different states.
And that's where the generation interval completely collapsed. It dropped from 7 years to basically the biological minimum.
That is the speed Wiggans was looking for back in college. Before 2009, you had to wait for a bull to be 5 or 6 years old before his proof was reliable enough to trust heavily. Now you can confidently trust a 2-month-old bull calf.
Yeah.
You are turning the genetic crank so much faster.
I really wonder how it felt for the two of them. To sit in that somewhat plain lab in Beltsville, look at their monitors, and watch the genetic progress graph line just go vertical, to know they had actually unlocked something that massive.
I think for Wiggans, it just validated everything he learned back in Laos.
How so?
He said farmers change when results are undeniable. Genomics was undeniable. Think about how stubborn we established farmers are. Yet, the shift from relying strictly on proven sires to heavily using genomic young sires was arguably the fastest, most aggressive adoption of new technology in the entire history of agriculture.
Farmers just dropped the old way completely.
They did, because the new way worked, and it worked fast. They saw the genomic heifers hitting the ground, calving in, and milking circles around their own dams. You can't argue with the bulk tank.
And the financial numbers absolutely back it up. Wiggans documented that the average net merit gain across the breed jumped from $40 a year before genomics to $85 a year after 2010.
That is the doubling we talked about right at the start of this deep dive. They literally doubled the speed of evolution in dairy cattle. It's breathtaking when you step back and look at it.
And the database just kept feeding itself. It grew exponentially. By 2025, they had amassed over 12 million genotypes in the system.
It's a massive positive feedback loop. The more data you feed into the system, the more accurate the predictions become. And because the predictions are so accurate, more farmers want to test their animals, which gives you even more data. They engineered a self-sustaining engine of progress.
So bringing it from history right up to the present day, we have this massive, beautifully functioning system. But it's not static. It's a living thing that has to adapt to the real world. And there is a very big shift happening right now in 2025.
The April 2025 net merit revision. This is where the theoretical history meets the road for you listening today.
What shifted in the formula? Why did they feel the need to rewrite the math now?
Well, the consumer market shifted, so the math absolutely had to shift to keep pace. The biggest change is they put significantly more emphasis on butterfat. It's now up to 31.8% of the entire formula. At the same time, they pulled back the emphasis on protein.
Why such a strong pivot to fat? For years, it was all about protein.
Because butterfat is where the actual milk check money is right now. Consumer habits changed. People want full-fat dairy again. They want real butter. They want premium high-fat ice cream. They want whole milk lattes. The market is practically screaming for fat.
That makes sense.
But they also made other crucial tweaks. They increased the weight on feed efficiency, the feed-saved trait, because feed costs are astronomical. And they heavily adjusted the formula to account for the currently high prices we're seeing for cull cows and bull calves.
So if you are a producer and you aren't paying close attention to these new weights in the index, you might unknowingly be breeding for the market of 2020, not the market of 2025.
Exactly. You are breeding for a ghost market. If you are still flipping through the catalog, chasing sheer protein volume above all else, you are actively fighting the index. You are building a biological factory that produces a product the consumer market is telling you it wants less of.
And for our listeners across the border, it's important to note this isn't just a U.S. phenomenon.
Right. Our Canadian friends just went through a similar shift. Lactanet overhauled the LPI, the Lifetime Performance Index, and the Pro formula in April 2025 as well.
It's a global trend.
It is. The underlying science is shared globally. In fact, Wiggans and VanRaden's work on creating a shared genotype repository helped make that international cooperation possible. But the economic formulas get tweaked for regional differences, like the Canadian quota system. But the overarching trend is universal: breed for extreme feed efficiency and high solids.
It really is a legacy that spans borders and generations. Wiggans officially retired back in 2016, but of course he kept working as an active advisor. And VanRaden is still at it, still refining the math through these 2025 revisions.
John Cole really did summarize it perfectly. Difficult to think of another pair of animal breeders who were so influential as a team. They gave up the spotlight and stared in the lab for almost 4 decades just so you could milk better, healthier, more profitable cows.
All right, Jake, let's pivot to the now what for the listener.
Yeah, let's get practical.
We have folks listening to this while running the mixer wagon or standing in the parlor or driving to the feed mill. They can't sit down and do the calculus that Wiggans did, but they absolutely can and should use the tool he built.
Right. You don't need to be a master mechanic to drive a high-performance truck, but you do need to know how to shift the gears properly so you don't blow the transmission.
So let's give them the playbook, the barn math. Based on everything we've talked about with the index and the revisions, what should they be doing when they turn this audio off?
I like to break it down into a simple 30, 90, and 365-day plan. Concrete, actionable steps.
Okay, let's start with the immediate term, right now. The next 30 days.
Step 1. In the next 30 days, pull your herd's actual net merit average. Call your tester, look at your software, and do it today. You need to compare your herd average to the new April 2025 genetic base. And for context, that base is the average of all the cows born in 2020.
And what if a farmer looks at that number and sees they are below zero?
If you are below $0 on that new base, you have to realize you are losing ground fast. Remember the speed of progress we talked about? The entire breed is moving forward at a clip of $85 a year. If you are just standing still, or if your genetics are below average, that profit gap between you and your neighbor is widening every single day. You are bleeding competitive advantage.
Okay, so that's step one. What else in the next 30 days? There's a specific phone call they need to make, right?
Yes. Step 2, pick up the phone, call your AI representative, and ask them one very specific question. Which lethal haplotypes do the sires sitting in my semen tank right now carry?
Addressing the fertility leak we talked about.
You have to fix it. If you are unknowingly using a bull that is a known carrier for HH1, and you are breeding him randomly to cows in your herd that are also carriers, you are just willingly accepting a 3.7% dip in conception. Why on earth would you do that?
It's throwing money away.
It is entirely an unforced error. The software exists to stop it, but you have to make sure your rep is actually utilizing that tool when they run your mating program.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, let's move out a bit. The medium term. The next 90 days.
Step 3, in the next 90 days. Do a hard audit of your herd's genetic diversity. In the genomic era, it is so incredibly easy to get swept up in the hype. We all get excited about the hot new bull that tops the list, and suddenly everyone is using his sons, his grandsons, and his great-grandsons.
So what's the danger threshold? What's the rule of thumb they should look for?
If one single sire, or one highly related sire family, makes up more than 15% of your replacement heifers, you have exposed yourself to a massive risk.
Because of the unknown.
Exactly. If that specific family turns out to have a hidden genetic defect that science hasn't found yet, or if they just don't pan out the way the early genomic numbers predicted, you've put all your eggs in one basket. The most advanced math in the world cannot fix bad risk management on the farm level. Keep your portfolio diverse.
Solid advice. And finally, the long game. The 365-day strategy.
Step 4, looking at your strategy over the next year. Check your young-sire ratio. Look deeply at your breeding log. If more than 50% of your matings are to very young, unproven genomic sires bulls with less than, say, 75% reliability, you just need to consciously understand the trade-off you're making. You are trading predictability and stability for absolute maximum speed.
Is that necessarily a bad thing, though?
Not necessarily. Like I said earlier, speed is good. I really like speed in genetic progress. But you have to respect that it comes with variance. Some of those young bulls are going to drop in the rankings once their daughters actually start milking. Some will rise. You just need to make sure that aggressive strategy is a conscious, calculated business choice and not an accident just because the semen was cheap. Don't bet the farm on a stack of lottery tickets if you can't afford a few losing scratch-offs.
That is just incredibly practical. It really takes all this high-level invisible science and makes it highly visible and actionable right there in the barn.
That's the entire goal. The math only matters if it changes what happens in the parlor.
You know, as we wrap this deep dive up, I just keep thinking about that core image of the two of them, Wiggans and VanRaden, spending 38 years working together in the exact same building.
Never once chasing the fame, never trying to be the loud face of the dairy industry on magazine covers.
They truly proved that the biggest, most sweeping changes in dairy don't always happen in the barn. Sometimes they happen on a tiny cardboard punch card, or a massive spreadsheet, or hidden deep in a database of 12 million animals.
They were the invisible architects. And frankly, because of their relentless dedication to the data, the cows we are going to milk tomorrow are going to be infinitely better than the cows we milk today. That is a heck of a legacy to leave behind.
It certainly is. A legacy that literally pays the bills for thousands of families. And for you listening, if you want to see the actual charts, dive into the historical data and get a full line-by-line breakdown of that 2025 net merit revision we spent time on, head over to www.thebullvine.com.
We've got the full story and all the resources right there, and trust me on this, you really want to read up on those new fat and protein economic weights before you finalize your next semen order. It will change how you breed.
Absolutely. Dairy farmers are incredibly resilient people, and now, thanks to the quiet work of men like Wiggans and VanRaden, you are armed with the best, most accurate data in the history of agriculture. Use it to your advantage.
I couldn't have summarized it better myself. That's another powerful story from the Bullvine podcast. These are the people actively building the future of dairy.
Find more deep dives and stories that matter at www.thebullvine.com. Next time, we're taking a completely different track. We'll be talking to a young breeder who is actively taking extreme genomic outliers and doing something completely unheard of with them in his breeding program. You will want to hear this one. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Stay safe out there.